All right, so I'm gonna do the appendicular skeleton, I'm gonna do the humerus, and then the radius and the ulna. So the humerus will start superiorly and then move down inferiorly. Okay, so if we start at the top, probably the most noticeable feature, let me move this guy back a little bit. Probably the most noticeable feature, the easiest to pick out, is the head of the humerus. Now, the head of the humerus is going to articulate with the scapula into the glenoid cavity. So if you're trying to figure out what's right and left, a good place to start is to look at the head, and this should face in medially towards the shoulder. You see, so it can stick right in here. So if this is the head, you see this projection that sticks out to the side. This projection is the greater tubercle. Okay, so you have a greater tubercle here, then you have a lesser tubercle, and then in between you have this groove that you can run your finger through. That's the so in between intertubercular sulcus. So greater tubercle, lesser tubercle, gonna be for muscle attachment, intertubercular sulcus, and then the head, which articulates with the scapula. So you can see the same features here, right? Greater, lesser, and then you see this little groove here. Okay, so then what we look at is the anatomical and the surgical neck. So your neck lies below your head, right? And so if I put my finger around this way, you can see I come around, you can see like an indentation in here. So it goes all the way around the head, like your neck would. That's the anatomical neck, okay? So that's the appropriate anatomical neck. But down here, if I put my fingers like this, okay, so right here, that is the surgical neck. It's a common site of fracture and repair, so it's called the surgical neck, okay? So head, greater tubercle, lesser tubercle, intertubercular sulcus, anatomical neck, and surgical neck. Okay, moving downwards, we see a projection come right here. That is the deltoid tuberosity. So tuberosity or tubercle is any kind of projection, usually from muscle attachment. So this deltoid tuberosity that you see here is for attachment of the deltoid. Okay, then moving down, we see epicondyles. So you have so epicondyle means upon. So you have them on the sides here. So you have a lateral and a medial epicondyle. So you can see them here, lateral, medial, so they're on the sides, epicondyle, okay? You also have condyles here, so condyles are for attachment, but on the humerus, they have very special names. So let me show you really closely. So you'll see one that looks like a little ball right here, and then you see one that kind of looks like a spool of thread or a pulley. This one is the trochlea. This one is the capitulum. So the capitulum is the name for the lateral condyle. The trochlea is the name for the medial condyle. Okay, so capitulum, trochlea. Okay, capitulum, trochlea, lateral epicondyle, medial epicondyle. Okay, and then you see two little indentions right here. Those indentions are where the radius and the ulna are going to articulate. So see how they swing up into here? They're swinging into these spots. So that's going to help you figure this out. So if you look at the radius swings in to the outside one. Your radius is always on your thumb side when you're looking. So this one is the radial fossa. So remember that the radial fossa fits the radius, and it's right next to the capitulum, okay? This one then has to be where the ulna goes, and it's called the coronoid fossa, okay? It's called the coronoid fossa because the ulna has a coronoid process that swings into the coronoid fossa right here, okay? So radial fossa, capitulum, coronoid fossa, trochlea, and then you have epicondyles on this side, deltoid tuberosity, and then we have the head, greater tubercle, lesser tubercle, intertubercular sulcus, surgical neck, and anatomical neck. And you can see all those features on here, okay? So that's the humerus. It's the humerus. And so then we're gonna move forward and see where all these things swing into. Okay, so humerus. Moving into the radius and the ulna. The ulna is always easy to figure out because it has a U shape, right? So that's the only bone that looks like that. It's gotta be the ulna, okay? So the ulna is gonna be medially when it swings in, okay? So it's got some cool features. So the back, right where your elbow is, that is called the olecranon, okay? So this is the olecranon. So that's going to be facing towards the posterior part of your elbow, right? Because think, you're in anatomical position like this, yeah? So this is sitting backwards this way. Okay, so here it is, the olecranon. So if you look on the inside, that's going to be the trochlear notch. So that's the U for the ulna that you see. That's the trochlear notch, okay? Notice that the trochlear notch, if you look here, fits into where? Ta-da! The trochlea is, the trochlea of the humerus. So let me show you that a little bit better. See, so I can stick him. Trochlea, trochlear notch, they fit perfectly. So that's why they have those names. And remember, this fossa was the coronoid fossa. So this has to be the coronoid process. So the coronoid process and the trochlea fit into the coronoid fossa, or sorry, the trochlear notch fit into the coronoid fossa and the trochlea. Yeah, so that's how they articulate. Okay, so those are the features of the ulna. So olecranon, trochlear notch, coronoid process, and then as we come downwards on the arm, we should also know the radial notch. That would be an important one to know. So if you articulate the radius with the ulna, maybe you can see it better here. Do you see how the radius can kind of move and swing? But where it swings into, there's a little notch on the ulna. So do you see it looks like a little curved part where you can fit the radius right in and move him around? That is the radial notch, okay? So the radial notch. And then the last thing is the styloid process. Now remember, we saw a styloid process on the on some of the facial bones or some of the cranial bones. Anytime you hear styloid, I like to think like a stylus or a pen that I could write with, but I always think S for styloid, S for sharp. So it's the pointy, this pointy part that comes down here. And it's gonna be the medial side of your wrist, okay? So if you look down at your wrist, it's where it's gonna meet with the carpal bones. Again, let me move this guy back so you can see him a little bit. He's not really good at bending right now, but you can see it comes down and points right here where you're gonna meet with the carpal bones. Uh-oh, he's dislocated. Okay, he's back. All right, so that's the ulna, features of the ulna. Always look for the U, that's how you know it's the ulna. And the last one is the radius. How I know when I'm looking at the radius is he's the only one that looks like you could just put a stamp on him. Just, yeah, it's completely circular, which means this is the head of the radius, okay? The head of the radius articulates with, look, the radial fossa, the capitulum. So it's gonna pop right in here, and you can see head of the radius, ulna, humerus, okay? Radial fossa, capitulum. So it comes and swings right in here. It also swings into the radial notch of the ulna. So radial head, radial neck. You'll also see a radial tuberosity. Okay, so it's the protrusion that you're gonna see that comes out of the radius here. So radial tuberosity. Okay. And then the last thing is also gonna be, it also has a styloid process. So let me pop him up here. He also has a very sharp, looks like you could write it with a stylus, right? Stylus means sharp styloid process here. So the radius and the ulna both have them. And if you look, right, you can see them on either side here. They're pretty sharp. Okay, so that completes the humerus, ulna, radius, and I guess we can pop through the hand right now while we're here, okay? So probably the easiest thing, skip over the carpals first and look at the metacarpals. So these are your metacarpals, is what you see right here in your hand. So these are your metacarpals, okay? And then you have phalanges. So phalanges, these guys. So you have a proximal, middle, and distal. Remember, distal always means the furthest away, the furthest out. Proximal is the closest in. So think into the rest of the limb. Proximal, middle, distal. Now do note that your thumb only has two, just a proximal and a distal. There is no middle. And you have the same kind of setup on your toes. All right, so the last thing it probably is to look at the carpal bones. These are something that can be really tricky for people. I use the mnemonic, Sally left the party to take Kathy home. So I always look for the scaphoid. I think it's the easiest one to pick out because it kind of looks like an S to me. So I always start here. Sally, so scaphoid, left, lunate, the triquetrum, pisiform. He can be a hard one to find because he's kind of, he looks like he's attached but he's really not. And he looks like a little pea, like a rounded little pea. So Sally left the party. So scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, pisiform. And then Sally left the party to, right here, start with the second row, to take Kathy, and then home. Okay, let's get that again. It's hard trying to mirror you and look at this. Okay, so where am I? Sally left the party to take Kathy home. So that last row is trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, hamate. Okay, those might take a little bit to look at. So Sally left the party to take Kathy home. Okay. All right, so I think that covers it for the upper appendicular skeleton. So stay tuned for the lower.